Hello and welcome to Property Mastermind Podcast, episode 203. Today we are talking how to spot potential property development sites that others walk straight past. Let's jump on in and you're going to learn a few things that will make you be a little bit more attentive when you're looking for sites. Hey, and welcome to episode 203. I'm Hilary Saxton and this is Bob Andersen. Hey, Bob.
Hey, Hilary.
How you going?
I'm going really well.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, as usual, it's like, surprise, Bob, this is what we're talking about today. That usually comes from a conversation I've had with people. And so today really covering off on those sites that other people walk past and we choose not to, or lucky developers don't. But before we do, episode 203, the book, it's going out to Mia Cowley. Mia, books in the post. Had a chat with Mia today. She's ready to move forward faster. So let's see how we go. It'd be good to have you in our community. We will welcome you soon, I know. But anyway, Bob, thinking about the developments we walk straight past, or some walk past, because as always, there is always a bottleneck. Bottleneck can be finance. Bottleneck could be construction prices too much. The bottleneck is at the time the problem that all developers are facing. And right now, as of May 2025, heading into June, finding sites can be challenging in some areas. And so being a little bit more creative with your thinking can often lead to finding sites that do stack up and do work. So we're going to unpack that today and talk about some success stories that our students have had by just using different techniques to look, and then outline the first steps that the listener can take today. Maybe you can give away a wee tip, Bob. Bob's sitting there right now thinking, oh my goodness. Well, we'll do that at the end.
Yes, a tip.
At the end, we'll give away a tip on how you could listen to that. But anyway, so there are great opportunities hiding in plain sight often, aren't there?
There can be, yeah. And it can take many forms.
Yeah, could you think of probably one that was a massive opportunity that you found that had been overlooked by so many others? What's one that comes to mind that was yours?
Well, I'm going back a few years, and we looked at a site that had been on the market for a long time. And so it came on at a particular price and it didn't stack up. And what can happen if a property sits on the market for too long, it can go stale. And so what happened is that the seller adjusted the price downwards a bit. And we kept in contact with the particular agent that was dealing with him. And it ended up there's a couple of agents over a period of time. But it was a site that we liked. And it reached a point where I thought, it doesn't really quite stack up at that amount of money. But what I'd like to do is have a talk to the owner. And so we arranged through the agent to have a talk to the owner, and I put the proposition to him that what he wanted to do originally, it had a development permit. He wanted to develop it and keep some of the stock as a long-term investment, but he just couldn't get the finance. And so he decided to sell. And we knew that. So what I proposed to him is a form of joint venture, which would enable him to go forward and end up with a couple of investment properties, but also sell the site because it was starting to hurt him. And I know he was under pressure from his financier by the time we got to talk to him. And that's what we did. And so it was a mixture of a couple of different strategies, but part of it is what we call a stock back deal. And so we agreed to buy it at a particular price, which was on dollar value a bit more than what it was worth. But what he did is he took a certain amount of cash from us and the rest of it in stock. So we paid him a couple of townhouses at the other end at cost price. So we didn't make a profit on those two, but we made a profit on the rest of them. It was quite a large development. It was 22 townhouses. So that gave him a couple of townhouses to keep, which is what he always wanted. He got a sale, but it wasn't all in cash. Some of it was in stock. And it worked out pretty well. It worked out for both parties. So that was a deal that sat on the market. It went stale. It was a bit overpriced, and then we were a bit creative with putting it together. And in the end, it worked for both parties.
Yeah, that's so good. In the end, it worked for both parties, and that's what you want. It needs to be like a win-win for everybody. Everyone feels like they had a good deal happen out of it. Bob, it brings me to thinking about one of our current mentoring students, Tom, who finally got his plans through council last week, which was very exciting, and it was a 1 and 2 3 where they'd previously only allowed 1 into 2, and he thought there'd be a lot of objections, and there were objections, weren't there?
Yeah, there were a few. I think he had something like about 12 objections, but they weren't on town planning grounds.
What were they? What grounds were they on?
A bit of a NIMBY thing happening, I think. It was in an area, what would you call it, regional area. And of course, you got some old farmers saying, oh, nothing should be subdivided under 50 acres or whatever, And but the bottom line is that none of the objections had sound town planning reasons to object. And so the right thing happened. It went ahead and it was approved.
And the good news is the council did point out that there is a housing shortage in Australia, and this sort of thing does need to happen. And it's not like he's planting 3 on a 600 square metre site. The sections are still going to be very, very large. What are they?
Oh, look, I can't remember off the top of my head.
But they are huge.
Yeah. They're bigger than what we're used to in the city for sure.
Yeah.
And
so
it worked.
That was him going back, double checking, just really knowing that if it only went into 2, and we'll get Tom on the podcast, but when he's going further through, but knowing that even if it went through at 2, it's still, I think it stacked up at about 20% then. But
yeah, that was a good fallback position to have.
Yeah, how about that for a fallback? And just being open to that is always really positive. The fact that he looked at that through a different lens, and that's something I often talk about, putting on a different lens. Well, I say change your specs. When you change your specs, you change what's next. So if you put on different glasses and try and see things differently, and often that can happen as well, Bob, with Reno on the front and the 1 or 2 build on the back, and which is the reason why we have our intro course, because that has a renovations course inside it as well. So that becomes quite useful, and using that as a strategy where you buy something that has something on the front, you renovate it, and then sell that off, and then develop on the back. When you're able to do that, that helps with cash flow, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and that reminded me of a project one of our students did, and I'm probably going back 10 years here. So it was a situation where the zoning was for townhouses. There was an existing house on the site, but it just didn't stack up if you demolished the house and built new. But it would stack up if you kept the house on the site and built 2 in the backyard. The problem was the distance between the house and the fence wasn't wide enough to run a driveway down, and there was no room on the other side. It was on the minimum side boundary setback on one side, and the other side, which was the widest side between the house and the adjoining boundary, wasn't wide enough, and council were quite strict on that. And it was about 600 mil short of being wide enough. And so what happened here is the adjoining neighbour had probably about 3 metres between his house and the side boundary. So we put an offer to buy a 600-metre strip off the adjoining neighbour. And that 600-metre strip wasn't doing anything. It was just grass, basically, and a fence. But that extra 600 metres made the whole deal stack up.
600 mil. Bob, how long does
600 mil wide strip, sorry.
Yeah. So how long does that take to do something creatively? And this is exactly what we're talking about, seeing things differently, being able to buy 600 metres if the neighbour doesn't really care.
600 mil width.
We've done it again. We've both done it. But we know what it means, 600 mil. So to buy that, how easy is that to do, and how long does that sort of thing take?
Well, it's really a realignment of boundaries. It's not a subdivision per se. It's a realignment of the boundary where one boundary moves 600 mil east, in this case. And so that's quite a quick approval. You have to settle on a value. Now, the landowner, that strip really had very little, very little effect on the value of his property, and he didn't really need it. But it was a nice little windfall for him to do that. Didn't make any. He actually made a joke of it. Said, "Well, that's a strip I don't have to mow. That's twice up and down the side I don't have to mow." But he got a chunk of money out of it, which was great, and it enabled the whole thing to happen. And so that little realignment of a boundary and a settlement, it was pretty quick.
Yeah, that's epic. So that's a new way of looking at things and noticing what's possible. So then we've talked about Tom, we've talked about that, and like renovating the front and then developing on the back and either choosing to keep or choosing to sell and then using that money to move forward with. So there are two different strategies in there when you do that. What about when things have been on the market for a while, like you said, and then you realise that the owner, they're not always desperate to sell, they have to, but sometimes they just want to cut it loose. What about when that happens? What's the benefit there to having done your homework on the sites in the area?
Well, it's not always easy to talk down a landowner who's got an overpriced property, particularly as a developer, because a lot of people out there have this opinion, oh, developers are ruthless, they're wealthy, and they just try and rip you off. And it's never a good base to start with. But what can happen if you've got an overpriced property and it's been on the market for quite a while, and they're not going to get it. They're not going to get their price because it is overpriced and people are smart enough. They're hoping for a wood duck, but the wood duck never appeared. That can be an opportunity to consider a joint venture. Now, I'm assuming it's got development potential or we wouldn't be interested in it in the first place. And they want too high a price. I know developers going to buy it, but they've got this figure locked into their head. And so potentially there's a couple of things that can happen, but if they were to do a joint venture, what we call a joint venture with the landowner, and come in it, they could get the price they want or even a little bit more based on two things: the value at what it's really worth plus a chunk of the profits. And if you add those two things up, it might well be all of what they're asking and some more as well. But it means that they're going to have to get involved in a type of joint venture to get that extra money. But they're not going to get it by trying to sell it because they've already tried that. And so that can be an opportunity to suggest such a thing on an overpriced property. The other thing is sometimes people get a figure in their head. So I'm talking about someone who's selling a potential site, but they want too much for it. But they're just locked into this figure. And I've seen people like this. So when you're buying a site, there's a couple of different things to consider. One is the price, but don't just lock in on the price. Think about the conditions. And I had one once where a guy, he had a figure in his head. It's a long time ago, but it was $1 million. Now, it wasn't worth $1 million. It was probably worth about 900,000 really. But I could see he had this figure, and so he wasn't going to sell. I think he wanted to be able to tell his friends, I sold my block of land for $1 million. Now, that's not much these days, but it was back in the day. But you know what he didn't care about was how long it took to settle. So I got a long settlement, which enabled me to get a development permit and a building permit. It was about 10 months. And so he got his $1 million, but he had to wait 10 months for it. But he didn't care. Time didn't matter. He just had this fixation on the $1 million. I think it was that's when $1 million was worth something, And so in that situation, I didn't settle until I had the building approval. So pretty quickly, I think it only took about 6 weeks after settlement, we were building.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so although we paid over the odds for the land, we saved on holding costs and interest. Had we settled in 30 days at the lower figure, probably wasn't a lot of difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know what, Bob, you've said a couple of words that I'm going to just go over. Bob used the word NIMBY before, which is a person who's like not in my backyard. That's a NIMBY. So you want to develop and the neighbours all complain. Another word you've used in this podcast, in case people don't know, we use the word wood duck. And a wood duck is somebody who isn't educated, buys a site, doesn't know what they're doing, and it's never going to stack up. Pays too much, yeah. Unfortunately, usually drags a few investors down with them and the whole thing goes down the googler. And then you were just then talking about a joint venture with a landowner, a delayed settlement, and it made me think of somebody in our mentoring program right now who's on her second deal. Don't you love that? She is on her second deal while in the program, or putting it together and looking at now just talking about with the landowner this week for a joint venture with a landowner, and looking at exactly that, just delaying things and getting things underway. So there is so much opportunity. And I'll say her name. It's Marina, and she's just a legend. Just a pleasure to work with. Just a really good person. And you just know someone who's done the homework, understands everything. When she doesn't understand it, she comes to you, she asks, gets the information. And when you have that confidence behind you, when you know what you're talking about, it's so easy to have that conversation with somebody and say, hey, there's an opportunity here for you and me. I can't purchase at that price, but if we do it like this, you will get that and more, and I can make this happen. And you only can do that if you are confident enough to move forward with those conversations, which is where our course just absolutely, helps people move forward. And I'm just going to brazenly say it because a little bit, there's just new courses popping up every day from people that haven't even done property development. I had a chat with somebody this week and they said, doing their course. And I was like, they've never even done anything, but they have written a book. So people think they have, but it's pretty easy to be sold to. So creatively doing stuff also means creatively looking into who you're buying your education from, I think, too. But anyway, that's just my little side dig there, because it scares me when I talk to people who are trusting people who don't really know what they're doing. Pretty frightening. So anyway, we've talked about now offering that delayed settlement and still being able to pay the people the money they want, which works. And we're doing that ourselves too with the industrial projects, Bob. The delayed settlement, or getting the DA, getting things approved. Just explain that.
Okay, so we're doing 2 industrial projects at the moment. They're similar, but they're in different places. One is 16 industrial units. These aren't large. The mezzanine plus the floor, probably about 140, 150 square metres. We're doing one project with 16 and we're doing another project with 24. But what we've done here is we've bought a parcel of land that's in an industrial subdivision. So we've got a developer doing an industrial subdivision, cutting it up into industrial lots. And we've come in early and signed a contract to purchase subject to the titles issuing. So we've come in very early. And on both of these, because they're in high demand, we've signed a contract before any of the construction work has started on these subdivisions. In fact, in both cases, they've sold out prior to even starting to do any construction on site. So that's great for us because we can start our development permit early, and we can't settle. In fact, we don't settle until titles are issued on the lots in the subdivision. And that can take, to build it and get the titles on one of these subdivisions, it can easily take 9 months, 9 or 10 months. So that gives us 9 or 10 months head start to get our development permit. And so we can pretty much have a development permit by the time we settle. And that saves a lot of interest had we settled and then started to get our development permit. But it also enables us to lock in a deal earlier.
And the nice thing about that, which alludes to the next thing I'm going to bring up around, changing that lens and seeing what's possible and seeing what other people don't see, is that we did build the relationship with the real estate agent, and we missed out on them, but one of them came back to us because another developer who'd purchased 3 of the sites could only do 2. So we were able to purchase. So again, that goes to part of that strategy being making those right connections with people and having that opportunity for us when somebody comes knocking on our door saying, hey, do you want this? And they just make an amazing profit for our investors, which is so good. The profit is more. In fact, we don't even like sharing the information so much because people will expect that that's what all profit margins will be, and they can't. But we were incredibly lucky. So that's another strategy, of developing of what others walk past. Don't walk past the relationships. And that brings me to the point of going back going back to sites and double checking and seeing if people have changed their mind, or it now does work, or the council's having relaxations, or there are law changes. There is also that potential, Bob, isn't there?
Yeah, well, town planning changes are a big one, and they happen from time to time with councils as they revise their planning scheme. Not just revise their planning scheme, because they might only do that every 6, 8, 10 years, but they make a lot of amendments along the way, what I call little Band-Aid fixes. And that can open up opportunities as well if you're aware of them and can act, fairly quickly.
Another one is absolutely knowing your patch so well, and we do talk about this over and over and over. You have to know your patch, because there is often that quick sale that, like we've had happen for many people, and you've had it happen for yourself, and just like us with that industrial, because we understood exactly what worked, what it was going to cost. We knew everything. Do you want it? Yes. And we've seen that with mentoring students in the past, and unfortunately they missed out this week, and they did know the patch, but it had gone within 30 hours, he said. So you've got to know your patch so well so you can be ready to jump straight in if something does come up.
You have to be able to move fast, which is why we say choose a patch and become a real expert in that area. For the whole purpose is to be able to make a fast decision. That one we just mentioned a moment ago, one of those industrial projects, you're right. By the time we found out about this industrial subdivision, they were all under contract. But we had a good relationship and kept building one with the agent and said, look, if any of these don't go ahead, we'd like to know about it. And you might call it lucky, but I don't. I mean, you create a lot of your own luck. There is such a thing as luck for sure, but you also can create luck yourself. And because of that relationship, he rang us and said, we've got a developer who wants to pull out of one of the lots. Are you interested? I've got a list of people to phone. And we only asked one question, what price is it? Basically, how much per square metre, because we knew what we wanted to pay. And he said, X dollars. We're in. It was a 30 or 40-second phone call, and we were in because we know it's our patch. We knew the right price to pay for it. We knew it would be in high demand. And because of that relationship that we built, we're given first opportunity, and you grab it.
And you might be listening now thinking, well, that's industrial, but that also works for any size site or any site, because we've had many people had that happen. It happened to Durgish, which went to market last Saturday. I have everyone know, which is so exciting. And he was ready to go. He absolutely knew his patch. He knew what he had to get something for. And we have mentioned this sale, but the owner of the house was tired of, because his mother was living in it, and many of her grandchildren were freeloading, and the son said, I've had enough, I'm selling it. And he just rang, I think he rang a buyer's agent, and I had actually connected this mentoring student with that buyer's agent. He rang him, and he was the same. He was able to put in an instant offer. Somebody else did as well. So here's another trick to being really ready, which is, even though we're talking about, seeing opportunity, being ready for opportunity. So because he was ready for the opportunity, meaning he had the money ready to go, he had the structure set up, he understood the patch. When one person put in an offer with conditions, and remember, the owner lived in a different state and he'd had enough, and I just need to sell this thing. And you can kind of feel how that is. We all get to that point. He offered, $50,000 or $30,000 less, whatever it was, but he went unconditional. He didn't need any other clauses. He, knew absolutely everything about it. So that's all part of being fully ready for opportunities when they come, and also for, that's something that other people walk past because they're not ready. They don't know. They miss those opportunities, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
So, Bob, what would you recommend that somebody does today? This is the mini challenge. What would be your tip for people getting started? What's the biggest one that you think that if somebody, apart from obviously getting educated and, having a look at what we offer, because it seriously is fantastic, but what is their next move if they need to do something? What is the best thing they could do today?
Okay, we'll bypass education and take that as a given.
Yes,
is really understand Well, there's a couple of things that happen simultaneously. There's almost three things, but they're all interrelated. So one is understand what you can afford to do. So if you could afford to do a duplex, well, there's no point looking at 6 townhouse sites for yourself, So understand what you can afford to do. And if it's not enough, if you don't have enough money, then you're going to have to consider investors. So that's a path you have to go down. Having understood what you can afford to do, where are you going to do it? And that's your patch. So you need to understand, well, where am I going to do this development and what type of development? So they're interrelated, because knowing what you can afford to do is very important. But values change. Different suburbs, different areas have different values. So once again, your patch is related back to what you can afford to do. If it's an upmarket area, it could be an area where if you do a duplex, they might sell for $2.5 million. But another area, if you do a duplex, they might sell for $1.2 million. Half that. So location has a lot to do with what can I afford to do, and the type of product. What is it? So typically we'd start off at the bottom of property development would be a simple 2-lot subdivision, and we go from there. So look, if that's what you can afford to do, and you just want to use your own money, then that's where you start. Don't waste your time looking at 4-packs. So that's it. Understand what can you afford to do, where are you going to do it, and what is the product you're going to do. And because they're all interrelated, you need to solve that. Well, it's not solving it. You need to make those decisions up front. And then, as you said, once you've got that patch, dig deeply on it and become an expert in that area.
And I'm going to make a challenge for everybody listening. I dare you to spend a solid 30 minutes tonight on realestate.com and just getting a handle of if you have an idea of what your patch is, and then getting yourself really familiar with what's selling, what new stock's coming to the market, where are things working. Just become a little bit more familiar with the opportunities that are out there and noticing what's happening. So when opportunities do come your way, you actually do notice them, you're a bit more open to them, you're ready for them, and you can move toward them. What about that for a tip, Bob?
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's really looking at the market as it exists today.
But my next tip would be, don't get caught on just doing that over and over, because depending on whether you're risk adverse or what slows you down, whether you're not an action taker, or you're too much of an action taker, or you're a procrastinator, whatever your reason for not being where you want to be right now, because most people are listening to this because they want to do property development. If you want to do property development, then make sure that you don't spend all the time just in a mode that's not going to move you forward, meaning looking at stuff. You can look at stuff, but then make sure what you're doing is useful and you're looking at the right thing. You're not just sort of doing research and sort of, study sort of thing. Really make sure that you're taking actions that are going to give you a result. So taking action that will gain traction and gain momentum and give you a fabulous outcome.
That's what it's about. It's acquiring the knowledge and putting it into practice. Otherwise, you just got a head full of knowledge, and you're here to make money.
I talked to a past mentoring student today on the phone because he's in a deal with another mentoring student, and we're involved in that as well. Anyway, I gave him a ring to have a chat about a few things, and he's got another development underway. So it's really exciting when you are in a community where everybody is doing some really cool stuff. Hey,
yeah, it's so exciting.
Yeah.
We just came off a Q&A, one of our regular Q&As where everybody gets on and we answer questions, and people are tossing stuff back and forward as well when we're live. And you went through just the people that were on that, or just a handful of all the people that were on it. And who's doing stuff at the moment? We know there's just so many people.
Craig and Tia Piver, they've just put an offer in on a second site, and their first site they've got.
They're up to plan sealing, so they're very close to getting titles on their 3 lots, their 3-lot subdivision, and they're putting their foot on another site.
Really exciting. Then we had Marina on there who's chatting about the joint venture.
On one of her deals, she's just up to negotiating building contract with the builder and then looking at potentially a joint venture on another side.
She's looking for investors too. So if you want to, you're welcome to reach out for me if you'd like to have a chat with her. She's looking for an investor for the second deal she's got underway, which is pretty exciting. And I'd work with her for sure. And then who else was on there? Kyle. Kyle was on there. He's doing 13 lot subdivision.
Yeah, he's up to plan ceiling.
Yeah,
he sold them all. He sold them off the plan ages ago.
Yeah.
So now he's finished the construction. So he's just pretty close to getting titles and settling.
Yeah, life-changing stuff. Just so many people on there that are on and are actually developing. So if you're thinking about developing, these aren't anything special apart from people like you who want to do property development. So you're welcome to have a chat with me if you want to see if, what we do might work. We've got our 3-day workshop coming up in September, which is always awesome. Before that, there'll be another masterclass, I'm sure. But yeah, if property development is something that you'd like to do, we've given you a tip. We give lots of tips away in this podcast. Do not be a wood duck. No one wants you to be a wood duck. And yeah, move forward and make your dreams come true, because there is such potential to have a life change when property, done well, property development is a fabulous tool, fabulous vehicle for making money.
Oh yeah, it financially changes people's lives big time because it's just that sort of thing.
Yeah. It is. Well, Bob, I think we're at the end. I think what I hope people have got from this podcast is that there are potential opportunities that people walk past, and there are so many more. There's lots of different things that you would walk past, but just don't brush everything off. Have a look, see what's possible for you, and look what could be. When you change your specs, you change what's next, and maybe that's the way you need to look at things. So Mia, the book will be in the post to you. Everybody, we hope you got something from this week's podcast, episode 203, and anyone wants to talk to me about property development, I would love to chat to you. All right, well, we will catch you next week. Bye for now.
Bye now.